Okay, welcome to Witch Police Radio. I'm again on the internet where we all live with our, pandemic lives, sitting behind a computer. But I'm here with someone who hasn't been on the show before, and actually, the guests on this episode's music is fairly new to me. One of the things that I like to do in order to find new local music is I kind of every few months I go on Bandcamp, just type in Winnipeg, and then just go through as much of it as I can find that's tagged with Winnipeg, and I find some cool stuff there that I kind of wouldn't necessarily see through the other sources I find local music. So that's how I found the guest on this show. And I think that the best way to start this off is if you want to just introduce yourself and maybe give a bit of background about what it is you do musically.
Yeah, you bet. Well, thanks, Sam, for having me. And I love the way that you found me. It reinforces tagging and like
it works. It works.
It works right on. Yeah, for sure. So my name is Ali Khan. I'm a music producer here in Winnipeg, and what I do is I create a variety of different styles of music. But the main project I think that you found is the one that I release music under the name Yo-You.
That's right. That's what I found.
It's an ambient music project, and really what it is it's music to help primarily me relax. And I found other people really enjoyed it too, so I started releasing music through that pseudonym. I think as early as 2014, I think roughly,
okay,
when I started doing that. Yeah.
Well, the one thing that surprised me too was, I found you, I listened to that. I definitely got the same vibe from it, and I want to talk to you about that in a little bit. But I was surprised at how much of a discography you have, because there was, from that one record, the newest one you have out, it led to another one and another one, and then I kind of saw the breadth of the catalog you have there. So how long have you actually been doing this, under this name or others?
Yeah, I've been writing music for a very long time, since I was about 16 would be when I legit started producing music on cassette tapes.
Cool.
And that's like in the mid 80s. It's been a while.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I've been working through a variety of different styles of electronic music. I really landed into like a solid groove in techno for a few years, and I still do some of that type of work right now as well. But this particular style of music is something I started doing probably around 2012, 2013.
Okay.
The origin story in it was like really kind of cool. So what was happening is I was tracking some pads for some, just kind of atmospheric dance music, if you will, and at the time, and I love the spatialization of those pads and the sounds and the way they swirl and stuff. And I thought, well, like, what if I just slowed this thing down the way I'd slow down a record? And I did.
Sure,
and I
sure.
slowed it down like three times, specifically 3 times. And so the first album I released that way was actually an album that I recorded. All of the tracks were recorded at 3 times the speed that you hear them, and I just slowed them down, and it had this effect. It's like that you hear, basically.
That's where the meditative kind of vibe comes from.
Yeah, exactly.
Super relaxed. Yeah.
And then of course, from there I said, well, why do I have to slow the tracks down? Why can't I just play that way to begin with? So,
right.
So I started doing that.
So what was the when you're doing that kind of stuff, I guess it's obviously it's very ambient is clearly the word that is used to describe it, but you're more so just putting out like textures rather than necessarily beats and even progressions. A lot of it sounds like it's relatively free flowing. That might be just kind of the perception of feeling relaxed while listening to it. But you know what I mean, right? It's all it's all about feel. How do you every band I've ever played in, and it's been a while since I played music, it's always been the complete opposite of that. It's been super energetic and high strung and aggressive, and I think that's just part of my personality. But the idea of making music that is calming is something that I wish I knew how to do. Like, how do you get into the mindset, I guess, of putting those textures out and creating them with your equipment?
There's a few things, right? Like it's definitely a body feeling thing. So there's actually maybe a couple things I could mention. It's a great topic, actually. I don't think about it too much.
That might be the solution, is just not thinking about it.
Yeah, no, actually there's something behind this, actually. So there's 2 things. Like, one thing is I'm really into sound design. So I'm pretty intentional about the instruments I use, and there's a lot of custom sound development that goes on. I experiment with synthesizers like a madman. It's not uncommon for me to buy and sell synths like, every couple months
Oh,
and
really?
just
Okay.
cycle through them. And, because what I'm trying to do is just like stay on top of technology and really find the best tools to be able to create the sound that I like to feel. And so I find myself, like, especially lately, working with a lot of tools that have a lot of programmability to them. So
Okay.
that's kind of one thing. So I spent lots of time in sound design, like probably more time than anything else. So so I kind of perfect the sound that I'm playing. And then the other thing is just the performance part of it is definitely a body feeling. It's kind of like I have to kind of slow down into it. One of the series of, like, people talk about their, the fortunate events that kind of bring them to where they are. And one of the things that I was really lucky to come into was a friend invited me to play music for yoga classes.
That
And one
makes
thing led
absolute
to,
sense.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And one thing led to another, and I started performing yoga music, like classes, like music for classes regularly.
Okay.
For a yoga studio in Winnipeg. And it was interesting because when I first showed up to those classes, I came with a slightly beat oriented style. It had like slowed down rhythms. You could almost imagine like a little bit techno trippy sound.
Okay.
And gradually, like one performance at a time, I started just to kind of drop all that stuff because especially some of the classes I was playing for, they have like, very long sitting on the floor poses that can be like 3 to 5 minutes.
Right.
And it seems really inconsiderate to actually put too much ideas into people's heads while that's happening. And it started to become this thing where I was like, oh, I get it. Like, so in some respects, maybe I've been schooled in meditation and yoga through, trying to perform for those classes.
Yeah.
And it had this effect because, just like I said, like one class at a time, I just got more and more comfortable releasing all that. I call it aggression. Like, it's not aggression in a bad way, but it's like this, like, I have something to say kind of aggression, that kind of thing. And it just kind of slowly fell away a little bit at a time. And like, I got really, really comfortable performing what you hear, especially on some of those later albums. Yeah.
Well, then maybe a question about that is that how, especially if you're doing that for yoga classes and you're trying to sort of set the tone, I guess, for the class by having that going on in the background, how deliberate is what you're doing? I mean, is a lot of it just kind of happening on the spot, or is it all very well mapped out and you have already determined these sounds, this structure?
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot because it's kind of unusual. The sound itself is designed. So one thing to be said is like 50% of what you're experiencing in that is the quality of the sound, because we're dealing with like synthesizers and customized instruments effectively. So it's like you picking up a guitar and strumming a note on it, and I pick up the guitar and strum a note on it. There's going to be something very similar about that. So like the quality of the sound is a big part of it, and I show up with most of that kind of program because of the design that goes into making the sound. But then the performance part of it is completely ad hoc. It's kind of like a full body improv, I call it. So I'm just kind of sitting there trying not to get ahead of myself or anybody else, and like breathing deeply and just kind of following where I'm curious about the sound. It also means that I have to be very, very careful about the tonality of what I play. So I'm very careful not to like make chord changes happen too abstractly, because they can really shift a person's thinking.
Sure.
Right, and in and out of, right. And so it's very kind of cautious, and it's almost like I don't know if you could use the analogy of like kind of slowly meandering, in the dark. And kind of taking a step and just saying, okay, like, is there something here? Okay, yeah, there's a bit of something there. And then I kind of go off in a little direction another way, and you can kind of feel it, and you feel that doesn't feel quite right. So I kind of back out of it and kind of move more slowly in another direction. And I keep just, wayfinding myself through the sound that way. Every once in a while, I go a little bit like relatively wild, like, and play like a bit of a melody. And that's just improv with scales. The inspiration from that comes from some of the, I guess, the style of performance you hear I think in Northern Indian music, if I'm not mistaken, where there's like traditionally like a very strong drone and a center, and then on top of that, some prescribed scales that are used for improvisation. And I'm not pretending that I actually know how to do that at the level of classical music, but I take inspiration from the idea of that in any case, and kind of riff out on some scales that I like that way too. You know?
Well, it almost seems like it has a lot in common with more kind of harsh drone and noise music, and but pleasant. It's like you're taking the same thing of just these like long passages of not a single note, but like a single vibe, and just kind of drawing it out, which is similar in a lot of aggressive stuff. But yeah, it's just yours suits the site, the area that you're performing it in, the people who are hearing it, I guess, more than some of that heavy stuff.
Yeah, I have to be somewhat gentle with people in that state. I mean, a lot of times I think, I mean, I've been in classes like that, and you're kind of opening yourself up to a bit of vulnerability when you're laying there, and
Sure.
you know, and taking direct instruction from a teacher and following them, you know, to your best of your ability, and opening your mind up and kind of being relaxed. It's you'd hate to actually like shock someone during that. So it has happened though, where like I've made a mistake, and like
Okay.
electronics, you know, loud noise. It's not.
And does that just disrupt the whole class?
Usually people laugh. It's
Okay.
because yeah, but it does disrupt things. But it's very fast. It's kind of, you know, it's only.
Yeah, then you go back into what you're trying to do.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and maybe it was supposed to happen. Who knows? Maybe someone is overthinking. Maybe it was someone is overthinking a bit, and they needed a
Yeah.
a wake up call. Who knows?
How do you take that stuff then? I mean, I know, like you said, you spend a lot of time on the designing the sound and getting the sound you want, but in terms of the, like you said, ad hoc performance aspect of it, how do you take that and then decide, okay, I'm going to release an album? What goes on the released music that you put out?
Right.
Do you record when you're actually performing and take passages from that, or how do you sort of determine, okay, this is good enough, or this is, valuable enough, I guess, to include on something that's going to be heard more than once?
Yeah, for sure. Some of the releases on my label are just basically live recordings from those classes.
Okay.
And all I've done with them is given them a little bit of studio treatment to kind of balance the sound and frequencies, and then removed any things that I thought just didn't fit, But some of the performances in classes have been suitable, and they basically walk out and I've got like 60 minutes of music or 90 minutes of music, and it's, edited down to an album. Then there are other situations where I'll very intentionally kind of create an album.
Okay.
It's still a bit of studio. It's the same process I described to you, but in the studio by myself. But when I do that, I have the liberty of like being, I have a lot more tools at my disposal. Like I've got, the whole.
You've everything, all your gears.
Yeah, exactly. And if I think of an idea, I can pause for a minute and set things up and go do that. So you'll find that some of those albums have a lot more going on. Like I think the last album I released is maybe the one you may have heard, which, there's some sequenced melodies in there that sound a little bit more. Those would be really hard to do in a live setting with electronics unless I prepared everything, which is not something I would like to do that much. But they have a lot of, like, I'm in the studio kind of tweaking the sequence till I get it just right, and then I record a take or two or three.
Okay.
Pick the one I like, and what I'll tend to do is record layers of stuff. So I'll get kind of one bass idea down, and then record another set of ideas and layer them on top of each other, and just keep building this stack to create the song in the end that you hear.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you have to be in a different kind of mindset recording that in the studio than you are, live with an actual listening audience there? Regardless of how much they're actually paying attention, you're creating the atmosphere for them, right? And by yourself, you're by yourself. Is it a different thought process?
It is. Yeah, it is very different. I find it way easier to play music for people than by myself. I start thinking very easily, or I get distracted checking Instagram or Facebook when I'm at home. Whereas there's something about I call it the fine line of performance. Once you start, you're like on a tightrope for like an hour, right? And it's a pleasurable experience. I don't mean to make it sound challenging or difficult, but it is this experience where you're on the spot, and there's something that keeps you there because of like it's easy to keep the attention focused on the performance for like an hour and not really fall out of it,
Well, you
because
have to, right? Because
audience, right? Because you have
people
to,
are
right?
watching. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and yoga classes are fun because they don't watch, but they're very
Right.
they're tuned in, but they're not looking at you, which is kind of neat actually compared
So
to.
you're just off in the corner, just providing the atmosphere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But I do the same thing in the summer when I can, and you know, I'll set up in parks in the city and bring a small sound system and do the same kind of thing for folks there in that setting, and it actually works out the same way. It's
Really, I was going to ask, because that seems very different because you're in
Yeah.
kind of open air, and I know you have on some of your recordings, you have field recordings as well. So you have nature sounds and things coming in, which I guess is happening organically when you're performing outside. But it just seems like it'd be a very different feel to hearing that in an enclosed space versus just kind of out in the open air. Does it works the same though?
It does to me. Yeah, from a performance perspective, it feels just as kind of open and free. Yeah, the field recordings are different though, because I'm not too sure if anyone knows that they're there when you're sitting outdoors in the park, because like you said, they blend in with everything else, right? But yeah.
What are you looking for with field recordings? Like, what kind of sounds are you trying to find to kind of fit with what you're doing?
What I'm usually really attracted to are sounds where there's very little, well, actually, frankly, no man-made sounds. So I get kind of upset when planes fly by while I'm recording and I have to kind of pause and start over again. But
yeah,
I'm looking for that just like that uninterrupted sound of being in nature. So it's easy to get to, easier, I shouldn't say easy, but easier to get to on longer hikes where I'll kind of get out from a vantage, you know, from a start point 3-4 kilometers in, and usually at kind of like the right elevation too.
Yeah.
The lower if you're in a bit of a kind of a low spot along the trail, it's great because you don't get a lot of the surrounding sounds. Like sometimes you'll still hear the highway and things like that, and you just don't want that, right? So I'm trying to get that sound of like just open space in nature without man-made sounds. Same thing goes for, I've used some ocean recordings as well, and I've been fortunate to get out on like some cloudier days where there's been no people. And you know, I can set up a field recorder at the side of the ocean and record there for, you know, 10-20 minutes kind of thing, and grab uninterrupted sound, which is absolutely lovely. Yeah.
If you say you get 10 minutes of ocean sounds, which section of the ocean sound of that recording are you using, and why? Like what, you know, say you end up using like a 3-minute section of that 20 minutes. Why is that 3 minutes? Like, what are you specifically hearing in that field recording that you know is gonna work or is gonna contribute to what you're making yourself?
Yeah, it's probably a very aesthetic thing. So it's a matter. I tend not to edit the field recordings, which is interesting. Right. Yeah, like I was saying earlier, if I get interrupted by some kind of sound like a plane or a car or something like that, I'll actually just stop and start over, and I'll trash that recording. I don't think that's even something I've thought of. That's like something I do on purpose. I just, in principle, try not to edit them. Okay. And then what I'm going for is like the balance of frequencies mainly. I don't know. I find the sounds really musical. You know, that just similar to what you were saying earlier about drone music. Like in the noise, there's something there as well, right? Like yeah. So like in the static noise of the ocean, you know, just sitting down and listening to that, I just love the ups and downs of the frequencies and the crescendos. And to me, there's some music in that's really interesting. And if I use it in a song like I do, it's usually kind of what influences all the other pieces around it. So that becomes the bed, and then it's almost like I'm jamming to that, you know.
Okay. That's interesting.
And just kind of complementing it is maybe a good word, or painting in with it. With some other colors. You know? I
like that, because that's the reverse of what I expected. I thought you already had the piece figured out. You're trying to find a nature sound that goes with it. But I like that's kind of the starting point.
It's the other way. It's kind of the other way around. Like it's the bed, and then it's the inspiration for the rest of the stuff that comes around it.
Yeah.
So like on that album that we were just talking about. Well, actually, not that one. Let's see if I can remember my own music
in your vast catalog.
Yeah, there's a song that is a piano piece, and it is recorded around some aspen trees that were sounding really awesome in Assiniboine Forest, just here in the city.
Okay.
So I was out there one day last year, just as things were, it's on the album All Colors, in the last song called Without Words. And these aspen trees were sounding just remarkable. They were still dry, no leaves on them, and it was the spring, and they were kind of all clacking together,
Right.
making that kind of sound, right? So I really was inspired by that, and that's what created the piece of music that sits with it. And
I think that a lot of people would see trees and not even, people are so busy, right? The idea of thinking of the tree, first of all, the trees are making a sound, and then secondly, like, oh, I should record this. Like, the sound is worth actually documenting, right? Like, I think that's a different way of looking at nature than, especially in cities and stuff too, right? A lot of people are just, it's there, but you're getting from point A to point B and you don't even pay attention. And it's cool that the idea of an aspen tree sounding great is something that I don't think you hear people say very often. So I like your way of looking at it.
Yeah. It's a great way to slow down, as you say, like it's and just kind of pay attention to what's going on. It takes effort to get there. I had a day off work that day.
Yeah.
So, right. So, and, I had to kind of drive there, kind of walk into the forest, find a good spot. And I wasn't sure what I was looking for either at that point, but that's part of it too. It's just kind of being ready to listen and doing that deep listening and really kind of tuning in. Yeah. It's easier to do by myself, I find, for sure. Because if I'm with somebody, I feel the need to talk or explain things or
and then you miss it, right? You miss the great tree sound because you're for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the recorded stuff, the albums that you have out, obviously, you explained the yoga class side of things. That makes complete sense that music is very suitable for that. Who do you have a kind of a grasp on who's listening to this stuff outside of that context? Like, who's downloading your music? Who's listening on Bandcamp? Who's listening on streaming services? I know you probably don't have the exact demographics of who's checking you out or whatever.
I don't, yeah.
Like, who is it for, I guess? Do you want people to be doing things like meditation, like yoga, while they're listening to it, or what's sort of the goal of having this out there for people to check out on their own time?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much of an idea of who's downloading the music. But I can share some thoughts about just people I've met face to face who talk to me about what it does for them, and it matches what I would hope for. So I mean, first and foremost is to help people slow down and relax, which is what I frankly want for myself when I'm writing the music. That's how I use it too. It's to kind of keep me balanced. It's part of my own personal practice for being who I am, and it some people can listen to it and have that effect as well, and that seems to be what works. And so I've heard some wild stories, like there was a couple that used it when they were birthing their child, for example, and they wanted relaxing music in the birthing room. I've heard a great story from another friend who has chronic illness problems, and it causes them to not be able to sleep well. So they use this music to be able to relax at the end of each day and just kind of get into more of get into like a brainwave state, I guess, that helps them sleep. That's actually been a theme from quite a few people, actually, that just helps them relax at the end of the day. And there's another kind of set of stories I often hear, which is people love working to this kind of music too. Like because I think I get it, because I do too, and I know why. It's possible to listen to music like this without having to tune in. There's no lyrics, there's no words. It can be background music if you want it to, and it can help with focus. Right. So I think that's kind of nice too. Like, people do coding to music like this, and I've heard that story. I certainly do work to it. I listen to other artists that are similar to what I do in some cases, and I find it very, very helpful when I'm doing like deep thinking work.
That's a cool idea. Yeah. I mean, I listen to all kinds of stuff while I'm working, and there are definitely some choices I've made in terms of what I'm listening to that maybe was not appropriate
Yeah,
for trying to
yeah,
get into the zone of doing work. And I can see this working maybe a little better than some of the stuff that I've tried in the past.
yeah,
But yeah, I
yeah,
like that. I like that.
yeah,
What is
for
if
sure.
people are hearing about you for the first time on the show, how do they find you? I know you have, like I said, you have a lot of music out there. It seems like you're putting out at least a couple albums a year,
Mhm.
based on your discography there. So what's the best way to hear your stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the easiest and best way is to go to my Bandcamp site, which is no more words, all one word. So no more words.bandcamp.com.
Cool.
I
And I'll
also
link to
have,
that. I'll link to that in the show notes too. So
thank
people
you. Absolutely. So I absolutely have that. I also publish most of those albums through the streaming services like Spotify, iTunes, probably Amazon, and a bit of YouTube in some cases.
okay.
Yeah. And then in terms of like 3D in Winnipeg, because we're talking to a somewhat Winnipeg audience, and I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. And
I
it seems
prefer,
like things are
yeah,
happening now again too. Finally, like
yeah,
people are going
exactly.
out for
Yeah.
now anyway.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, a good place to follow me is on Instagram if you're comfortable following someone personally, because it's not a very curated experience, if you know what I mean. I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
post stuff about my life, but a lot of it happens to be music. If I'm playing, I perform at least once a month at a yoga class, so I'll usually post about that first if someone wants to come hang out there and do that. And if that's not, a person's jam, I do perform shows from time to time, not as frequently. And I'll announce those, on Instagram as I do them as well. I'm certain that coming up in the spring, weather permitting, I'll help organize a drone day event, which is something
Oh, cool.
I've worked on for the past few years. And I'll likely get a handful of other artists of like-minded music with like minds and similar music, more along a wider spectrum of drone, I would say, though, into a little bit of noise as well. And we'll do something in a park, I think, this year would be
Cool.
appropriate. Yeah,
Cool.
I'm not too sure if I'm ready to do an indoor, even though it may feel safe. I'm not too sure if I'm ready to do an indoor show just yet. I think I'll wait out a little longer, but I think outdoors would feel comfortable for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I think we're in this weird
Yeah,
period right now. People aren't
yeah,
sure what to do. I mean, like whether they want to go to shows or not. But
yeah,
outdoors obviously solves a lot of the problems there with being in a
yeah,
tightly packed room and
exactly.
stuff. So
Yeah,
cool.
and drone is awesome outdoors. It's
I
just the
imagine.
best.
I've never
Yeah.
tried. I've never tried checking out, but it sounds like it would be a cool experience to hear that
Mhm.
in nature.
It's something. I mean, what's nice about it too is you can do what you want to do with drone, which is lie down,
Right. Right.
right? And you can sit up for a little bit if you want, but really, I mean, like to really, I think this is a personal. I guess I'm saying that I find to really appreciate it. I'm quite happy lying down and letting the sun shine on my face, and
Yeah.
doing that. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think that goes to what you said too about it can be background music, but it can also be something that you're more engaged with, right? So depending on how
Mhm.
you want to listen to it, if you want to sit down and just like kind of soak it all in, that's an option as well as just doing something else while it's happening too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool.